During the Great Depression, families survived on almost nothing, yet still managed to put warm, satisfying meals on the table. In this video, I'll show you 25 cheap recipes our grandparents used to survive the toughest times in American history, the Great Depression, meals made from scraps, pantry staples, and pure creativity. And here's why it matters today. With grocery prices soaring, these forgotten recipes are making a comeback, saving modern families up to $5,000 a year. From cakes without eggs or milk to soups made from vegetable scraps, these meals are more than just food. They're stories of survival, wisdom, and stretching every last dime. Stick around to the end for the full breakdown and learn how to cut your food bill while honoring the past. Stone soup. Let's start with a story my grandmother used to tell about a pot of soup that started with just a stone. It sounds like a folk tale, and it was. But during the Great Depression, this tale came to life in American kitchens. Families had nothing. No meat, no fresh produce, sometimes not even enough to fill a single bowl. But they had community. Someone would boil a pot of water, drop in a clean stone, and say, "Let's make soup." One neighbor added onion peels. Another brought a carrot top, a scrap of potato. Maybe, if they were lucky, a leftover meat bone. Little by little, that empty pot became a hearty, nourishing meal that could feed an entire block. It wasn't about the stone. It was about turning nothing into something. Today, that same idea lives on. A modern pot of this humble soup costs just $3.50 and feeds 8, less than 50 cents a serving. During the Depression, it cost about 15 cents total. The secret? Patience. Let each scrap simmer slowly, releasing every bit of flavor. Onion peels for depth, potato skins for body, and the occasional bone for richness. Modern families using this technique report saving up to $125 a month just by using what they'd normally throw away. It's more than a recipe, it's a reminder. Every scrap matters, and every meal counts. Hot water. Cornbread. If you grew up in the South, you've probably had this. A skillet crackling on the stove, the smell of golden cornmeal filling the kitchen, and no one cared that there was no flour, no eggs, and no milk. That was hot water cornbread. Born from necessity, this recipe became a lifeline during the Depression when pantry shelves were bare. Families had cornmeal, they had salt, and they had boiling water. That was enough. They'd pour the water over the cornmeal, stir until it formed a dough, and drop it into a hot pan. In minutes, they had crispy golden discs, crunchy outside, tender inside. You could eat it plain, with beans, or even crumble it into milk for breakfast. During the Great Depression, it cost less than 2 cents per serving. Today, you can still make 20 servings for about $2.99 total, roughly 25 cents each. Compare that to a loaf of store-bought bread at nearly $5. Families who bake this instead of buying bread report saving up to $80 a month, and a lot more flavor. But the best part? It only takes 10 minutes to make, faster than a trip to the store, and way more satisfying. This wasn't just bread, it was survival, made simple and delicious. Egg drop soup. Back in the Depression, eggs were precious, nearly a luxury. Meat, even rarer. But one recipe changed everything. Egg drop soup. A comforting, nourishing meal brought to America by Chinese immigrants and quickly adopted by struggling families across the country. You'd start with a pot of seasoned broth, nothing fancy. Then gently stir in one beaten egg. As it hit the hot liquid, it formed silky, golden ribbons, dancing through the soup like lace. It was warm, it was filling, and somehow it made one egg feed 4 people. Back then, this cost about 3 cents per bowl. Today, around 45 cents per serving. That's still one of the cheapest, most protein-rich meals you can make. Families today say they save up to $50 a month by making this just once a week instead of a meat-based dinner. Add a few vegetables or scraps of rice, and you've got a full, hearty meal for less than the price of a coffee. It wasn't just soup, it was ingenuity in a bowl, and proof that comfort doesn't have to be expensive. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded families that something small, like one egg, could still bring everyone together around the table. Sometimes the simplest meals leave the deepest memories. Potato soup. If your family ever had a root cellar, chances are it was filled with potatoes, cheap, filling, and always reliable. During the Great Depression, potatoes were sometimes the only vegetable left in the house. But with a little know-how and a lot of patience, families turned them into something that felt decadent. Creamy potato soup. No cream, no fancy ingredients. Just potatoes, water, a pinch of salt, and the wisdom to let time do the work. By simmering the potatoes low and slow, they'd break down naturally, releasing their starch and transforming the broth into something thick, smooth, and comforting. It cost just 5 cents per bowl back then. Today, it'll run you around 40 cents, and you'll get 8 to 10 servings from just a few dollars worth of ingredients. Modern home cooks say they save up to $140 a month using this recipe, especially when they toss in leftover vegetables, cheese rinds, or herbs for extra flavor. And the best part? It reheats like a dream, making it perfect for weekly meal prep. This wasn't just about filling stomachs. It was about making something out of almost nothing, a bowl of warmth, pride, and quiet resilience. Oatmeal. Meatloaf. In the 1930s, meat was precious. A single pound had to stretch across multiple meals and somehow still leave everyone full. That's where the Depression-era meatloaf became a kind of financial magic on a plate. The secret? Oatmeal. Yes, oats weren't just for breakfast. Families discovered that mixing ground beef with oats, eggs, and basic seasoning could double the number of servings without sacrificing taste. It kept the meat moist, tender, and satisfying, while cutting the cost per serving in half. Back then, this meant feeding 8 instead of 4 for just 12 cents a slice. Today, with ground beef over $5 per pound, you're still saving big, cutting costs from $1.50 to 75 cents per serving. And it wasn't just dinner. Leftovers were sliced thin, packed into sandwiches, and sent to school or work the next day. Modern families say they save up to $100 a month using this trick, not just for meatloaf, but for burgers and casseroles too. It's proof that stretching meat isn't just about budget. It's about creativity, tradition, and squeezing every bit of value out of what you have. And when that meatloaf hit the table, nobody cared about what it lacked. They cared that it tasted like home. Scrapple. In Pennsylvania Dutch country, there was a saying, "Use everything but the oink," and in hard times, they meant it. That's where scrapple comes in, a Depression-era breakfast dish that turned pork scraps, cornmeal, and spices into something people still crave today. Families would save every usable part of the pig, things the butcher didn't want. These were simmered down into a rich broth, mixed with cornmeal, and poured into loaf pans to chill overnight. Once firm, it was sliced and fried until golden brown, crispy on the outside, tender and savory on the inside. During the Depression, it cost just 3 cents per serving. Today, even homemade, it's only 60 cents per portion, a fraction of the $4.50 you'd pay for store-bought breakfast meats. People now say replacing pricey bacon or sausage with scrapple saves them up to $90 a month without sacrificing flavor or satisfaction. And for those who grew up eating it, that first sizzle in the skillet, it's more than just food. It's a time machine back to chilly mornings, worn aprons, and the smell of breakfast filling the whole house. It reminded families that nothing needed to be wasted and everything could be made delicious. Baked beans. If there was one pot that could feed a crowd and keep people smiling, it was baked beans. During the Great Depression, these humble legumes were pure gold, cheap, shelf-stable, and packed with protein. Families would slow-cook navy beans with a splash of molasses, a spoonful of mustard, and if they were lucky, a bit of salt pork. The result? A thick, flavorful stew that simmered all day and filled the house with the kind of smell that made your stomach rumble. Back then, a full pot fed 10 people for just 15 cents. Today, it costs about $3.50 total for 12 servings, only 29 cents per hearty bowl. It wasn't just frugal, it was filling. And for families trying to make ends meet, that mattered more than anything. Modern home cooks report saving up to $75 a month by making big batches instead of buying canned versions. Plus, you get triple the protein and fiber without all the additives. This wasn't a side dish. It was a main event, a weekend staple, and sometimes the only thing on the table. But no one complained. Every spoonful was proof that simple ingredients could still deliver big comfort. Bacon and onion sandwich. Back then, bacon wasn't just a breakfast side, it was a treasure. And when families had only one slice, they made it count. That's where the bacon and onion sandwich came in. It was a masterclass in flavor and frugality. First, onions were sliced thin and slow-cooked until golden, soft, and sweet. Their natural sugars caramelized, creating a rich, savory layer that stretched the flavor of a single strip of bacon into something that felt like so much more. That one crispy slice was crumbled over the onions and tucked between toasted bread. The smell? Heavenly. The taste? Like a deli sandwich on a dollar store budget. During the Depression, it cost just 5 cents per sandwich. Today, it's around 75 cents, still a steal compared to the $4.50 BLTs lining diner menus. Modern families report saving around $60 a month using this method, stretching expensive ingredients like bacon by pairing them with flavor-rich, budget-friendly staples. It was a simple sandwich, but it fed more than hunger. It fed hope, pride, and the quiet joy of making the most out of what you had. And somehow, with just one slice, it still brought everyone to the table smiling. Fried potato skins. In the Great Depression, nothing went to waste, not even potato peels. While most folks today toss them in the trash, Depression-era cooks turned these humble scraps into something delicious. Fried potato skins. After peeling potatoes for soup or mash, families would clean the skins, pat them dry, and toss them into a hot skillet, often using a bit of saved bacon fat or oil. Within minutes, they turned into crispy, salty snacks that rivaled any modern chip. They'd season them with whatever they had on hand: salt, pepper, maybe a sprinkle of dried herbs from the garden. Back then, they cost virtually nothing, since you were using what you already had. Today, it's the same. Just pennies per batch, while restaurants charge up to $12 a plate for gourmet versions. Modern families report saving $40 to $60 a month by adopting this simple, smart approach, reclaiming food that would otherwise be wasted. And here's the kicker. Potato skins actually have more nutrients than the potato itself, packed with fiber, potassium, and iron. This wasn't just a snack, it was a statement that with a little creativity, even the scraps could be something worth savoring. If you grew up sneaking a few crispy peels off the stove before dinner, you know exactly how special those little bites could be. Slumgullion. They called it slumgullion, a strange name for a dish that became the heart of many Depression-era dinners. No one had recipes, just leftovers, scraps, and whatever hadn't spoiled in the back of the icebox. Meat trimmings, wilting vegetables, a scoop of beans, a heel of stale bread. It all went into one pot. What came out? A thick, savory stew that could feed an entire family or a small neighborhood for pennies. Back then, a large pot cost about 20 cents and fed up to 12 people. Today, it's still just about $5 total, or 42 cents per serving, compared to the $4 or $5 you'd spend on a single canned stew. The magic was in the method. You'd start with onions, build flavor slowly, then add ingredients based on how long they needed to cook. Each layer added something new, transforming scraps into a rich, filling meal. Families who bring this technique into their modern kitchens report saving $85 to $100 monthly, just by making use of what they already have. But more than that, slumgullion was a symbol. A dish that proved survival didn't have to be bland or boring. It just needed imagination. And if you ever sat at a kitchen table with a steaming bowl of it, ladled from a dented pot, you remember, it wasn't just stew. It was love in every spoonful. Depression cake. When times were tough and store shelves were empty, desserts weren't the first priority. But that didn't stop resourceful bakers from finding a way to treat their families. Enter the depression cake, also called wacky cake or crazy cake. It had no eggs, no butter, and no milk. But what it did have was flavor, softness, and that unmistakable cocoa richness that made it feel like a celebration. How did they do it? Simple chemistry. A bit of vinegar reacted with baking soda to create the rise, while oil gave the cake its signature moist texture. During the Great Depression, it cost just 15 cents to bake. Today, you can make the whole cake for around $2.50. That's just 31 cents a slice, compared to $4 or $5 at the bakery. And get this, it's accidentally vegan, which makes it perfect for modern diets, too. Families who use this recipe instead of store-bought desserts report saving up to $70 a month, all while enjoying a slice of sweet history. But more than the savings, this cake brought joy. It reminded folks that even in the darkest days, there was still room for sweetness. If you ever helped dust powdered sugar over a cooled pan of this after school, it wasn't just dessert, it was a reward for making it through. Bread pudding. In Depression-era kitchens, stale bread wasn't waste, it was an opportunity. That's how bread pudding became a staple. When loaves went hard, families cubed them up, soaked them in a simple custard of milk, eggs, sugar, and vanilla, and baked them into something rich, warm, and full of comfort. The scent that filled the house, cinnamon, vanilla, a hint of sweetness, was the kind that made kids come running. Back then, a full pan cost about 18 cents to make. Today, it'll run you around $3 total, or just 50 cents per serving, a fraction of the $8 to $10 charged at upscale bakeries. And families today say they save up to $65 a month simply by turning leftover bread into this timeless dessert instead of tossing it out. Many added their own twists, raisins, a drizzle of molasses, or herbs like mint from the garden. Some even served it cold the next day for breakfast. But the magic was always in the transformation. What looked like scraps became a dessert that tasted like something from a fancy cafe. If you remember watching your mom pour warm custard over torn bread and sliding it into the oven with a smile, it was more than dessert. It was love, repurposed. Molasses cookies. During the Great Depression, sugar was scarce and expensive. But molasses? It was cheap, plentiful, and packed with unexpected benefits. That's when clever bakers began making molasses cookies, not just as a treat, but as a source of strength. Molasses was rich in iron, giving these cookies a surprising nutritional punch. They weren't just snacks, they were energy boosters for families who couldn't afford fresh produce or vitamins. The recipe was simple: flour, molasses, baking soda, and a pinch of warming spices like cinnamon and ginger. Roll, bake, and enjoy chewy, fragrant cookies that stayed fresh for days. Back then, a whole batch cost just 10 cents and made 24 cookies. Today, about $2 per batch, or just 8 cents per cookie, compared to 35 cents for store-bought brands. Modern families save up to $60 monthly baking these instead of buying packaged sweets, and they're better for you too. They were easy to store, perfect for lunchboxes, and often wrapped in wax paper and tucked into coat pockets as a midday pick-me-up. If you remember pulling one of these cookies from a tin on the kitchen counter, soft and spiced just right. You remember how even the simplest treats could feel like a celebration. Rice and raisins. In the darkest days of the Depression, when even milk and sugar were limited, families found a way to make dessert feel like a warm hug. They turned to rice and raisins, a dish so simple yet so satisfying it often became the highlight of the week. Just a bit of rice, slowly simmered in water or milk, with a handful of raisins tossed in. As it cooked, the raisins plumped up and released their natural sweetness, turning plain rice into a creamy, naturally sweet pudding. It was sweet, warm, and filling, comfort in a bowl. During the Depression, a full batch cost 7 cents and fed 6 people. Today, it's still around $1.80 total, just 30 cents per serving versus $4 to $5 for prepackaged rice pudding. Modern families report saving up to $55 a month using this as a go-to breakfast or dessert instead of boxed cereals and snacks. And kids loved it, even without added sugar. It was soft, familiar, and just sweet enough to feel like a treat. If you ever sat at your grandma's table and scraped the bottom of the bowl for the last few sticky raisins, you know, this wasn't just about saving money. It was about savoring what little you had. Potato and onion pie. When meat disappeared from the dinner table, families didn't panic. They got creative. That's how potato and onion pie became a Depression-era classic. It was rich, savory, and satisfying without a single bite of meat. Thin slices of potato and onion were layered like a lasagna, seasoned simply with salt and pepper, and baked slowly until the edges crisped and the insides turned creamy and sweet. Sometimes a splash of milk or a spoonful of bacon grease was added between layers, if it was available. But even the most basic version felt like a full, hearty meal. In the 1930s, this dish fed 8 for just 12 cents. Today, it costs about $3.50 total, or 45 cents per slice, far cheaper than the $6 to $7 meat pies in stores. Families who serve this as a regular weekly dinner say they save up to $80 a month, all while cutting down on meat consumption. It wasn't just budget-friendly, it was deeply satisfying. And with a crusty piece of bread on the side, no one missed the meat. If you ever watched your mother or grandmother slice potatoes paper-thin with care, layer after layer, you know, this dish wasn't just practical, it was a quiet act of love. Eggless pancakes. When eggs shot up to 45 cents a dozen, pancakes could have disappeared from breakfast tables. But Depression-era cooks found a way to keep the griddle going, with eggless pancakes that were just as fluffy and golden, minus the pricey ingredients. The trick? A little baking powder and a splash of vinegar. Together, they mimicked the lift that eggs usually provided, creating pancakes that were light, soft, and perfect for soaking up syrup or jam. A full batch fed 6 people for just 8 cents back then. Today, it's about $1.20 total, or 20 cents per serving, compared to $1.50 for boxed mixes, or $12 at a diner. Modern families report saving up to $70 monthly by swapping boxed breakfasts for this homemade version, and they get way more servings for their dollar. You could jazz them up with mashed bananas, applesauce, or even leftover pumpkin. But even plain, they were delicious and dependable. The original versions of these pancakes were often cooked on wood stoves, giving them a slightly smoky, comforting flavor that made them extra special. If your childhood memories include watching pancakes bubble on a cast-iron pan while the morning sun hit the kitchen window, you know this recipe fed more than just bodies. It fed routines, rituals, and quiet joy. Johnny Cakes. Long before the Depression, Native Americans passed down a recipe that would later help feed countless families when times got hard. That recipe? Johnny Cakes. Made from just cornmeal and hot water, these simple flatbreads were a lifesaver when wheat flour was too expensive or unavailable. The dough came together in minutes, Then hit a hot griddle where it crisped up at the edges and stayed tender in the center. During the Depression, one batch fed 8 for only 6 cents. Today, the same batch costs about $1.50 total, or just 19 cents per serving, versus $3 to $4 for pre-made pancakes. They were versatile too, served sweet with a drizzle of molasses in the morning, or savory alongside beans at dinner. Families today say they save around $65 monthly by baking Johnny cakes instead of buying expensive bread and mixes. And for some, this recipe wasn't just about saving money, it was about honoring a deeper American tradition. If you remember watching a grandmother stir cornmeal into steaming water, then shape the cakes by hand, you'll understand. It wasn't just food, it was heritage on a plate. Biscuits and gravy. If there was ever a meal that proved flavor didn't come from fancy ingredients, it was biscuits and gravy. During the Great Depression, families learned to make the most out of what they had, usually just a bit of flour and a few spoonfuls of saved meat drippings. They'd whip up simple biscuits with flour, lard or shortening, and a splash of buttermilk if they were lucky. Then they'd take those flavorful drippings, stir in flour to make a roux, and slowly add milk or water until a thick, rich gravy formed. That gravy, poured over hot biscuits, could turn a bare pantry into a Sunday-worthy meal. Back then, it cost about 11 cents to feed 6 people. Today, around $2.80 total, or 47 cents per serving, compared to $8 to $12 at diners. Modern families report saving up to $90 monthly by mastering this hearty breakfast, stretching every bit of flavor out of even the smallest amount of meat. The U.S. Army even used variations of biscuit and gravy recipes during World War II for their mess hall meals because it was cheap, filling, and packed with calories for hard labor. And thanks to the high-fat content from the drippings, this meal could fuel workers through long days in the fields or factories, making it more than just a comfort food. It was pure survival. And for many, the scent of biscuits baking and gravy bubbling in a cast-iron skillet is tied to memories of slow mornings, full bellies, and the kind of love you could taste. If you ever woke up to that smell as a child, you know, it wasn't just breakfast. It was home. Potato pancakes. When meat vanished from dinner plates, potatoes stepped in, and not just boiled or mashed. They became potato pancakes. Crispy, golden, and satisfying enough to be a full meal. Known as latkes in Jewish kitchens or plaki in Polish homes, this Depression-era favorite crossed cultures and dinner tables across America. Families would grate raw potatoes, mix them with a bit of onion and salt, then squeeze out the water and fry the mixture into golden discs. No fancy ingredients, just pure texture and flavor. One batch cost about 9 cents back then, feeding 8 hungry mouths. Today, just $2.50 for the whole batch, or 31 cents per serving, compared to $6 to $8 at restaurants. Modern cooks save up to $75 a month using this recipe for dinners, snacks, or even as a meatless main course. And here's a fascinating fact. The natural starch released from the potatoes acts as a binder, so you don't need flour or eggs, just technique. They were often made with whatever root vegetables were on hand, carrots, sweet potatoes, or even turnips. That made them a perfect clean-out-the-pantry dish. If you remember the sound of oil crackling and the scent of frying onions drifting through the house, you'll never forget how these humble fritters brought warmth to even the coldest nights. Cornmeal mush. When money was tight and cupboards were nearly bare, one ingredient stood out for its sheer adaptability: cornmeal. Enter cornmeal mush, a Depression-era staple that proved a single bag of cornmeal could feed a family for weeks. Cooked slowly with water until thick, cornmeal mush started the day as a warm, soft porridge. Let it cool and set overnight, and by lunchtime or dinner, it could be sliced, fried, and served crisp with a bit of syrup, gravy, or even beans. Back then, 5 pounds of cornmeal cost just 23 cents. enough for 2 weeks of meals. Today, the same bag is around $3.50, still stretching to about 15 cents per serving, far cheaper than boxed cereals or prepackaged side dishes. Families today report saving $80 to $100 a month just by incorporating cornmeal mush into their meal plans. What made it truly genius was its ability to transform from sweet to savory, from breakfast to dinner, with just a tweak in flavor or preparation. And thanks to its long shelf life, it was always on hand, ready to turn scarcity into sustenance. If your family ever served it with fried apples for breakfast or pan-fried leftovers for supper, it wasn't just economical, it was dependable, delicious, and deeply tied to the rhythm of home life. Dandelion salad. During the Great Depression, when grocery stores ran low and paychecks ran out, families didn't starve, they foraged. And one of the most overlooked heroes of the dinner table was the dandelion. Yes, that stubborn backyard weed became a life-saving salad green, free, abundant, and surprisingly nutritious. The key was timing. Families would gather the young leaves in early spring before the flowers bloomed, when the greens were tender and far less bitter. A quick rinse and a soak in salt water removed the last of the grit and bite. Then it was tossed simply with vinegar, a pinch of salt, and maybe, on special days, a bit of warm bacon fat for dressing. Back then, it was completely free. Today, while store-bought greens can cost $4 to $5 per bag, dandelion greens still cost only your time and attention. And nutritionally, they're a powerhouse. More vitamin A than milk, more vitamin C than tomatoes, and more iron than spinach. Families who reintroduce foraging into their lives say they save hundreds per year, while also reconnecting with nature and history. If you remember watching your parents kneel in the yard, basket in hand, picking dandelions with the sun on their backs, you know this wasn't just a salad. It was survival with dignity. Creamed chipped beef on toast, SOS. To soldiers and civilians alike, it was known, lovingly or not, as SOS. But behind the nickname was a dish that kept countless families full through the toughest years. Creamed chipped beef on toast began in military mess halls but quickly found its way into Depression-era kitchens for one simple reason. It was cheap, filling, and easy to make. With just a few slices of dried beef, families would whip up a creamy white sauce using flour, fat, and milk. The beef would be sliced thin, stirred in, and ladled over toast, biscuits, or even potatoes. Back then, it cost about 15 cents to feed 6 people. Today, the entire dish runs about $3.50 total, or 58 cents per serving, a fraction of the $8 to $10 diner breakfasts it inspired. It wasn't just economical, it was hearty, high in protein, and kept you going through long workdays or school hours. Families still using this recipe report saving $65 monthly, especially when stretching it further with diced potatoes or frozen vegetables. And here's a fun fact. The original U.S. Army manual included SOS as a recommended breakfast because it was high in calories, easy to scale, and beloved by troops for its stick-to-your-ribs comfort. If you remember your dad calling it by name while scooping it over toast, you know it was more than just a meal. It was a memory made with flour, love, and a pinch of humor. Mock apple pie. When apples became too pricey or too scarce to find, Depression-era bakers didn't panic. They improvised. Enter the mock apple pie, a clever creation that used Ritz crackers instead of fruit to mimic the texture and flavor of real apples. It sounds impossible, but the chemistry worked. Crackers softened in a sugar syrup made with cream of tartar, lemon juice, and cinnamon, replicating the sweet tart bite of cooked apples with stunning accuracy. During the Depression, this pie cost just 18 cents to make, compared to 75 cents for the real thing. Today, it's still a steal at $4 total, or 50 cents per slice, versus $7 to $8 at bakeries. So convincing was this illusion, Ritz began printing the recipe right on their boxes. and kept it there for decades. Modern families enjoy it not just for the savings, but for the surprise and charm of its backstory. Plus, it's a great conversation starter at gatherings. If you remember the first time you tasted this and thought, "No way, that's not apple," then you understand. This wasn't just dessert. It was proof that imagination could sweeten even the hardest times. Homemade butter substitute. When butter prices soared and dairy shelves emptied, families didn't go without. They got inventive. Enter the homemade butter substitute, a Depression-era marvel that mimicked the taste and texture of butter using what little was available: lard or beef tallow, salt, and a few drops of yellow coloring. Sometimes a splash of milk was added to make it creamier. Others used a pinch of turmeric instead of food dye to get that familiar buttery hue. During the Great Depression, it cost just 7 cents per pound, while real butter reached 45 cents per pound, a price many couldn't dream of affording. Today, this DIY version costs around $2.50, still a significant savings compared to butter's $6 to $7 price tag. The key was precise temperature control. Heat the fat just enough to blend in the salt evenly, then chill it slowly for that smooth, spreadable consistency. Modern homesteaders and dairy-free families alike have rediscovered this recipe, reporting monthly savings of $30 to $40 and appreciation for how resourceful our grandparents had to be. If you ever saw a block of this golden spread sitting proudly on the dinner table, shaped by hand and chilled in a mason jar, you know, it wasn't just fake butter. It was a small triumph in the face of scarcity. And every time it hit a warm biscuit, it reminded families that comfort could still be homemade, even in the hardest times. Hoover stew. Named not so lovingly after President Hoover, Hoover stew was born in school cafeterias and community kitchens, but it quickly became a staple in homes where every penny mattered. This one-pot wonder combined macaroni, canned stewed tomatoes, and cheap canned meat, usually corned beef, into a meal that was hot, filling, and could stretch to feed a dozen people. Some added corn or beans to bulk it up even more, turning humble ingredients into a meal that felt complete. Back then, a large pot cost just 26 cents and could feed 12 students. Today, it still only runs about $6 total, or 50 cents per serving, a fraction of the $3 to $4 canned pasta meals on store shelves. Modern families who bring Hoover stew into their rotation report saving up to $100 a month, especially when feeding big households. The beauty of it was its adaptability. Any canned meat could substitute, and you used whatever vegetables you had on hand. It was never the same twice, but it was always satisfying. If you ever stood at a school lunch counter holding a tin tray filled with this simple stew, or watched your mom ladle it into bowls on a cold night, you remember, it wasn't gourmet, but it was enough. And in those days, enough was everything. These 25 recipes weren't just meals, they were lifelines. They fed families, sparked innovation, and created traditions that still live on today. From stone soup to mock apple pie, our grandparents and great-grandparents turned scarcity into strength. And in doing so, they taught us that you don't need much to make something unforgettable. You just need heart and a little know-how. In today's world of rising grocery prices and overflowing waste, these Depression-era dishes aren't just nostalgic, they're relevant. They remind us how to stretch a dollar, appreciate simple ingredients, and bring families together around the table. If these recipes stirred memories or gave you new ones to make, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button, enable notifications, and join our growing community of resourceful cooks, memory keepers, and old souls who know that great meals start with wisdom, not wealth. And in the comments, share your family's Depression-era recipes or stories. Let's keep this legacy alive, one bite at a time.